Fabiano Caruana was leading going into round 7 of the FIDE Grand Prix tournament in Khanty-Mansiysk. So he seems on course for a place in the Candidates Tournament 2016. But the other place is yet to be decided, and that's really between Evgeny Tomaszewski and Hikaru Nakamura. Now, Tomaszewski has more Grand Prix points at the moment, but is suffering in the tournament, in this particular tournament. Hikaru Nakamura needs to make sure that he lands well above him in the tournament to get the necessary Grand Prix points that will take him through into the candidates. So, round 7, Nakamura was playing against Maxime Vachier-Lagrave, who is having a miserable tournament. He lost 3 in a row before this game, so Nakamura sensed that the Frenchman was rocking, and he played, I think, a very good strategy against the Frenchman. Played bishop f4, which is a very non-theoretical move. You know, we're taught knights before the bishops, and there's a good reason for this, that it's pretty clear where the knights want to be, usually in the centre, on c3 or f3, but it's less clear where the bishops want to go. So bishop f4 is really virtually unknown in top-level chess in this particular position. But a good idea against Vachier-Lagrave, who is a great theoretician. For instance, he's one of the world's greatest experts on the Grunfeld defence with g6 and d5, and he also plays the Slav. So bishop f4 takes him completely away from his opening preparation. Now, he played b6, so it's going into a kind of Queen's Indian, but with no knight on f3. No knight on f3 yet, anyway. And Nakamura plays a kind of Petrosian system. Normally this is played with the knight on f3, not a bishop on f4. So that prevents bishop b4, which would give black more control over the e4 square. d5, so this is a good response from black. And here we can see one of the drawbacks of committing the bishop at such an early stage. Black knows where the bishop is, and he wants to offer an exchange. And this exchange will really free black's position and solve a lot of his opening problems. So I think Nakamura reacted very well here and played bishop g5. And now here, actually, you could just nudge back with the bishop. And this is a known theoretical position, actually, well, say after knight f3. A known position from the Petrosian system, actually. But really not a very testing one for black, because in this position a3 doesn't make a lot of sense. It reminds me of a Tartikover Queen's Gambit, actually. You know, black plays knight d7 here and should have no difficulties whatsoever. So I think bishop e7 is a good move. But here I think Vachier-Lagrave showed his inexperience with this kind of position. He played h6, grabbing the 2 bishops, but actually allowing white a little nuance, little trick here. Queen a4 check. Perhaps he'd overlooked this move or underestimated it anyway. It's surprisingly difficult to deal with this move in a satisfactory way. If you play c6, then that leaves this pawn on prise. If you play knight d7, then bishop b5, followed by bishop c6, is rather unpleasant for black. The d pawn is going to drop. Bishop c6 is possible, and now there are 2 ideas for white. You could play bishop b5 and force exchange of bishops, and you could say that white has a small positional advantage here, because, well, if that pawn were back on b7, then black has no difficulties at all. But here there's a slight structural disadvantage. I mean, I think black is okay there. but it's possible to play that out for white. Or you could play as in the game, put the queen back on b3, play something like this. It wasn't possible to take that pawn for tactical reasons. You could play like this, and I think white is slightly better, very similar to the game actually. Instead of that, Vachier-Lagrave played king f8, which looks a bit odd, but actually the king is able to position itself on g7 after this move. And seems, well actually, it seems reasonably secure, but there is a slight problem that it's going to be weak on this diagonal very, very soon once white breaks things open. So I don't think this has not been a success for black. So the queen came back because Nakamura is about to play e4, and after knight takes the queen will be hit. But you can see that black is behind in development. If white doesn't break open like this, black is given time to play knight d7 and knight f6, then his position is absolutely fine. But Nakamura plays absolutely correctly, breaking open the position, using his lead in development. But also, having played e4, it means this bishop has some pressure on c6, and this bishop looks rather awkwardly placed on b7 now. And you know, white is beautifully centralized here, very active pieces. No doubt that Nakamura has come well out of the opening. And here, well, it's a difficult position already. Vachier-Lagrave's next move, knight c7, was definitely a mistake. I mean, some people have suggested rook b8 here as an improvement, but definitely white is slightly better here. For example, after taking and knight takes d5, and what a lovely centralized position. And then something like b4 to keep this knight bottled in. Black still has problems to solve here, no doubt about it. Knight c7, definitely a mistake though. There's this very nice move, knight c5, and I don't know whether Maxime overlooked this move or underestimated it, but things are horrible now. If bishop takes, you can see that opens up this. It's still, this bishop is a huge problem on b7. And here, for example, if queen e7, well, remember I mentioned that the king on g7 actually is a tactical liability. There's a nasty double attack there, check, and that wins the pawn on b6. So that's not possible. So Maxime took, and of course wins back the piece because of the pin. And now structurally this is dreadful. Isolated pawn, and this bishop is still a rotten piece. Nice play from Nakamura. Clearly with the knight on d5 there's no sense in having the rook on d1, and this gains control over the c5 square. So white just keeping control here, and now knight c5. This is of course what white is aiming for. And here, under pressure, Vachier-Lagrave blundered. He should play bishop a8. Now this is absolutely miserable, but it's a forced move. Of course, no one would want to consign their bishop to this dreadful square on a8. But trying to look on the positive side, at least that knight can come back to d5, and that gives black a little bit of hope in this position. I think, you know, it's a dreadful position, but you know, white still has to win this. It's not that simple. There is no clear win here. And I think this move, this tactical mistake, rook d4, is really an indication of how demoralised that Vachier-Lagrave is at the moment. It's simply losing straight away. You know, there's no fight in him. After this, the bishop is on prise, so he moved it, but rook e1 is a very nice kebab. Queen moves, and then the rook is taken on e8. So that is the fourth loss in a row by Maxime Vachier-Lagrave. He's having a miserable time. But a very effective display from Hikaru Nakamura. And that win brings him to 4.5 out of 7 in the tournament. And that means Tomaszewski lost yesterday. He only has 2.5. So that means in the Grand Prix standings, as far as I can make out, Hikaru Nakamura leapfrogs over Tomaszewski. Caruana drew yesterday. He has 5 out of 7, still on course. But as things stand, it looks like Caruana and Nakamura would go through to the candidates tournament. But there are still 4 rounds to go. There's still a lot can happen.